Hey, welcome to Home Video Hangout. I'm Cody, and in today's video, I'm going to be sharing with you my 10 favorite horror movies of all time. And now keep in mind, I'm not saying these are the 10 greatest horror movies ever released, because horror movies and movies in general are very subjective, and these are just my 10 favorites that I wanted to share with you for fun. So all these movies will be linked in the description down below if you want to pick up any of them for yourself and enjoy them yourself, but also I'll be keeping a look at the comments down below to see what you guys are watching. I'd love to hear about what your favorite horror movies are, or what you're picking up next, and try to watch those myself, but let's dive into the movie in the number 10 spot. So in the number 10 spot, I have the movie Hellfest. The Hellfest movie is a really fun slasher movie, and I feel it's kind of underrated. So I love the setting being an amusement park. I think that's a really fun setting for a slasher movie around Halloween time. And the ending of this movie is really great to me, especially too, because I enjoy all the scenes where they're kind of walking through the haunted house at the end and being pursued, the main characters. And there's a great cliffhanger at the end of this movie too, which makes me feel like there could be a sequel at some point, or at least leaves that open. And this film also got a really great 4K release that I really appreciate, which adds some great color and contrast to this dark film. And I would recommend this movie to any horror fan who hasn't seen it yet, because it really is a great underrated slasher movie. Now in the number 9 spot, I have the movie Malignant. This was a surprising movie for me. So this one's directed by James Wan, who is known for producing some really great horror movies, some really effective, scary horror movies. And this one I felt was especially unique. So, you know, the story or the trailer for this movie kind of keeps some of the storyline secret from you. And so as you go into this, there's definitely some surprises in store that you're not expecting. And it really goes beyond just the typical jump scare kind of stuff. There really is some unique special effects in this movie that I really appreciated, and storyline just keeps you guessing and on the edge of your seat, and a really satisfying ending as well. So I just really appreciated this film all the way through. It got a great 4K release, which I appreciate, as there's still other horror movies where we're waiting on 4K releases, and this one really deserves to be seen in the highest format possible. So definitely check this one out if you haven't already. It's one of my favorite James Wan films for sure. All right, in the number 8 spot is the movie Antlers, and I have to say, I saw this movie in the theater, and this is probably one of the scariest or creepiest horror movies I have ever seen. The movie has some very intense scenes in a very dark atmosphere throughout, and it's unfortunate this film has not gotten a 4K release yet, but at least we did get a good quality Blu-ray release for this one, because this one is just an incredible dark movie to watch, and if you love horror movies, you'll appreciate this one, because this isn't the kind of movie where they kind of keep you guessing of what's happening. They really show every brutal sequence in this scene, or in this movie, and that makes for a especially intense and effective movie. And there's few horror movies that I would say are on this one's level in terms of actual creepiness and scare factor. I mean, there's some others that, you know, maybe you could say are more gory or do other things, but this one is just an overall kind of thrilling, dark movie with a very unique twist. And so I really appreciated this one, and it's another one that could be seen as underrated too. I don't know if everyone really knows about this one, so if you haven't seen Antlers yet, definitely check it out. It'll creep you out. All right, now in the number 7 spot, we have the movie A Quiet Place, which is an incredibly unique film and has a great plot, a great cast, and some awesome looking monsters in it. I was also surprised and impressed that John Krasinski was the director of this film. It's very exciting that we have a prequel to this movie coming out soon in 2024, and I can't wait to see more of this world they've built too. And I hope that John Krasinski ends up directing more horror and thriller movies in the future too, being they made such a great film series here. The whole element of the characters having to stay quiet throughout this film, we just made it so unique and special, and you would think, you know, that might actually take away from the movie to some extent, but it really helps to up the tension of this movie, make it more of an edge of your seat movie, so when, you know, one of the monsters attacks or whatever, really add some shock value there. And I would say this maybe tips more towards the thriller side of things than actual horror movie, but I think horror fans will really appreciate this one, and I just think it's a great series overall that's very highly rated. Alright, now in the number 6 spot, we have the movie Slither, and Slither is more of a comedy horror movie. It's very campy, but it has some very creepy parts as well too, and I just have a lot of fun watching this every time I watch it. There's a couple specific scenes that really stand out to me. One of my favorite scenes in this movie is the movie with the big lady, we'll call her, in the barn, which if you've seen this movie, you'll know what I'm talking about. That's just such a crazy scene, a memorable scene. And this is just a film that I watch over and over again, probably at least once a year. And it's one that I enjoy sharing with people, as it's such a campy, fun type of movie, and just really has some good creepy parts as well. Now, in the number 5 spot, we have Barbarian, which was a simple yet effective horror film that combined comedy and disturbing horror scenes in a really great way. I think they chose a great cast for this movie too. Justin Long gave my favorite performance in this film, and I especially enjoyed the second half of the film where he's kind of the main protagonist. And it pains me so much that this movie has not gotten any kind of physical media release whatsoever. I don't know why that is, but they really need to make some kind of physical media release here, and it really deserves a 4K release too. So please, please, somehow help us get a release on physical media of this movie. And I hope that one way or another, this movie is easily accessible to people, because, I saw this in the theater. I loved it in the theater. It's been on Max/HBO Max, and I don't know if it still is, but this movie really needs to stay accessible because it is one of the greatest horror movies we've had in a long time. And I really want to see more movies like this. So if you haven't seen Barbarian yet, definitely check it out. It really offers a great mix of kind of mystery, horror, and comedy, and it just bounces back and forth between those things really well. Like, you think you know what's going to happen, why certain characters are there, and then you're totally wrong and something totally different happens. And it's just a really intriguing movie, and it has a lot of shock value too. All right, now in the number 4 spot, we have the movie Eight-Legged Freaks. This is another very campy, funny horror movie that has a lot of nostalgia for me, actually. I remember originally picking this movie up with my dad from, I think it was a Walgreens or something, just thinking it looked like a crazy movie, and we picked it up and watched it, and it ended up being a really fun movie to watch. And this one, I've watched over and over again so many times and shared it with so many other people, and I've had Halloween parties where I've watched this movie, and there's a couple specific scenes in this movie that really stand out to me too, are really fun to watch. One is the motorcycle chase scene, and the other is the scene on top of the mall where the guy is climbing the tower with the spider chasing him. And there's just so many great scenes in this though, and for being kind of a lower budget horror movie, I think this did have some pretty good acting performances, especially from the children in it. And so I was really impressed by this one when I first watched it, and it's really stuck with me since then, and I watch this on a regular basis. And when it comes to comedy horror, this is probably my favorite movie of all time. All right, now in the number 3 spot is arguably one of the greatest horror movies of all time in many people's opinions, and this movie has been said to be, a favorite almost to a point where it's like a cliche, and that is Halloween, as seen in my shirt here. Halloween is one of my favorite horror movies, and I'm referring to the original Halloween here. And I think John Carpenter did a great job, not only with the movie itself, but the Halloween theme song is so memorable and definitely would be considered probably my favorite song or track from a movie. And I think while this is an incredible movie and it's had such influence on future movies and horror as a whole, I can't say it's my favorite movie of all time. When I first watched Halloween, I had some level of appreciation for it. I wanted to really love it, but it also has a slow pace, and it's a pretty simple movie compared to other more modern movies that have more complex plots. So I do appreciate it, but there are a few other movies that you'll see that I appreciate a lot more. And that's probably pretty controversial because this is a great movie, but while I enjoy watching the entire series of Halloween movies that have come out, I would say this one is going to remain at my number 3 spot for a while. Now, in the number 2 spot, I have It Chapter 1. It Chapter 1 is one of my favorite movies because this is a movie that I saw in the theater when it came out, and this is probably the movie that got me into horror movies more so than any other movie ever. And when I first saw this, I wasn't used to watching too many horror movies, and so I went with a group of friends and saw this and was just so impressed by what they implemented in this movie, from the complex story based on Stephen King's great novel to the great cast of child actors here that we saw in other things like Stranger Things, and just all, how the incredible makeup and costume for Pennywise on Bill Skarsgård there, and the great setting, and just everything about this movie is just incredible to me. And the scares were effective, and I just love this movie so much. I went back to the theater and saw it multiple times. It's got a great 4K release eventually, which is just as impressive. And I just can't go on enough about everything I loved about this film. And it's just, to me, one of the greatest modern horror films that I've ever seen. Now, in the number 1 spot is my favorite horror film of all time, which is It Chapter 2. And I realize this is probably a pretty controversial opinion, but after being so impressed by Chapter 1, I couldn't wait to see It Chapter 2. And what really made this film stand out to me, even above It Chapter 1, was all the monsters and characters and special effects that were in this movie. And everything the characters had to deal with in this film just made it really great for me. And in the first film, it seemed like they really focused on Pennywise as the main adversary in the movie, and kind of the main focus of the movie. But here, the supernatural force of it seemed to take a lot more different forms, and I think that added to the movie in a lot of ways. But also what they did with having the various actors represent adult character or adult versions of the child characters from the original movie, and then still incorporating the child characters from the original movie in flashbacks in this film. I think that was really great, and was a really great continuation for this film too, and worked really well with Stephen King's original novel source material, where you had both child and adult versions of these characters. So I think those were the things that really stood out to me in this film. But this film to me is nothing short of a masterpiece, and the 4K release it got is just really incredible as well. Certain scenes in this film really stood out and were some of the best scenes I've ever watched on a 4K format film. And one example of that is there's a scene in It Chapter 2 where a little girl goes under some bleachers at a sports game, and Pennywise is there kind of lurking in the darkness, and the girl is following a firefly under the bleachers, and then she's interacting with Pennywise. But when we see both Pennywise with his white makeup and we see the firefly, they both really are vibrant and stand out with the HDR in this film. And then as the firefly is kind of flying around the screen in the scene, it works really well with Dolby Atmos, and you hear exactly where the firefly is if you have a good home theater sound system. So I really appreciated that scene and some other great scenes in this movie with a bunch of red balloons floating around, and they just did really well with this movie in general, but also with the 4K release. And so I was just so impressed by this film, and that's what made it my favorite horror movie of all time. And again, I know I put this above other great horror movies like Halloween and some of the other ones on the list, and there's a lot of other great horror movies out there, but this one is just so special to me and so enjoyable for me personally to watch. That's why it's in my number 1 spot. So that's my top 10 list of my favorite horror movies of all time. Make sure you check out the description below if you want to pick up any of these movies for yourself, and also let me know in the comments what your favorite horror movies are and what horror movies you're watching next. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit the like and subscribe buttons down below to see the latest videos I have releasing, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.